Hello, today we'll be exploring watercolor landscape. Make sure you get a reference and tape the edges so you have a clean, crisp border and that your watercolor paper doesn't get too wrinkled. Draw lightly with the pencil so that it'll show through the watercolor, so make sure it's light enough. You don't need to have all the details, just the generalization of your landscape. I'm going to start with a wash brush and wet down just the sky area, and I'm going to damp it before I add the color. That way the color bleeds into it without overstaining the watercolor paper like when it's dry. Dab the edges if you get too much water pooling. I lift it at a 25-degree angle so that the water flows down. And then I dry it with a hairdryer in between so that you don't get melted ice cream style edges. That way my edges are crisp. When I move on to each new area, I hair dry it in between. You'll notice that I get progressively darker as we come forward. We're starting in the background, working towards the foreground. And the next row in my reference photo, which I use from unsplash.com, which is some royalty-free and copyright-free imagery. The trees in that particular one were this kind of bright blue. They were subject to atmospheric perspective, where you have dust particles in the air and the sunlight's a certain, certain spectrum where it starts to discolor things in the distance. That's where you get like purple mountain majesty and stuff like that. The mountains aren't really purple, of course, but atmospheric perspective is fading them out with these different colors. Here I'm going back over the trees with a fine brush, doing little details just to add to the believability of what we have here. Okay. Now the trees are part of the midground. The next section of midground is going to be it's going to be a little closer to us, and so it's going to start to verge into more real colors. Should be a green hue to what we're doing here going forward. This is going to be, it's hard to tell, but it's a river with a bank on the far side, and then in the foreground, what's up close, there's a little bit of a bank that's there with grass work that we'll get into. But I'm adding more black into these greens because its contrast adds detail and dimension to what you're doing. Just like in OELD TV, where you have, TV advertisers they're broadcasting like how dark areas how dark the screen is to make the colors more vibrant. Same is kind of true in painting, right? You add black to your piece when you want your contrast and detail to be more predominant. Water work is difficult. It's often varied, and obviously you need to rely on your reference photo for most of the water work. You need to kind of look at the patterns, the ripples, the current, the waves, whatever is present there. You need to pay close attention to your reference photo so that you can mimic that effect. Obviously, I put in a little bit of a reflection on that water as well, which helps. And just kind of going through on that outer bank, adding in, again, I'm going to use more black in order to pop the colors a little better, pop the details a little better, and make it sharper in the foreground so that everything fades slowly as you go into the back. Here I'm just adding rock work along the far bank and into the water, little rocks that are dotting through this stream, this shallow river slash stream. And then I'm going to go back through and add just a lot of little tiny ripples, tiny water disturbances to indicate some motion in the river, that things are flowing forward and through. And that's a lot of detail. You're not going to get everything perfect to your reference photo. The good thing with landscape painting is you don't necessarily need to do that. One, nobody's going to be looking at the reference photo. Two, if you find a pattern that's believable, you can just stick with that. I signed it there and then decided I needed some more white highlight in, so I took a gel pen. Sometimes people will use white color pencil and just pop in a little bit of last highlights on the rocks and the river and some in the background there to just give it that crisp look. Here's the final product. Make sure that you remember to tape the edges for crisp border, no wrinkles. Use references, not just while you're drawing, but while you're painting as well. Draw lightly so there's no show through. Prop your board up at a 25-degree angle so the color and the water flows down the page. Number 5, wet the area first, then add color to it so that you get a smooth gradient fade. Number 6, background, midground, foreground is how you should be working. Also number 7, work light to dark. And then number 8, most important, dry the edges and layers in between so there's no melted ice cream edges. Go out and get it.